Fellow Ghanaians, good morning. Just last week, Ghana's communications minister issued a directive to DStv, that dominant pay TV provider on our market. The directive was simple. They must cut their subscription prices by about 30% or lose their license. Sam George's argument was simple. The cedi had stabilized significantly, exchange rates were firming up, and inflation was spiraling downwards. And in fact, these were precisely the same factors DStv had cited previously to justify an increase of about 20% in its charges. In the minister's views, despite these economic improvements in Ghana, prices continue to remain very high, rigid, and almost punitive. Only weeks earlier, you will all recall a similar uproar erupted over internet data pricing. At the time, this same minister, Sam George, had said he lacked the mandate to force telcos to lower data prices. He cited free market principles, among others. But through dialogue and sustained pressure, the telcos offered more data at relatively lower prices. So why do these multinational giants only respond when government wields the pressure? This episode is not just about DStv. It's about how the Ghanaian marketplace has become a legalized extortion rack where a handful of monopolistic, oligopolistic firms are setting sky-high prices, ignoring consumer value and invoking free market dogma when they are challenged. Worse, when government actually intervenes, the same consumers who suffer cry that we must leave the market forces to be. So let's get surgical on this. Ghanaian consumers pay the equivalent of about $83. That's about 850 cedis for the premium DStv bouquet, while subscribers in Nigeria pay only around $29 for the same content. Some will say, well, the Nigerian market is bigger. So why then do Angolans pay $33 or Liberia, with even much smaller market, pay $66? The data is there, and then we can go on and on. This disparity amounts to plain stealing, in my view. DStv has enjoyed market dominance for years, with little regulation and no real competition. And when the government demanded a price correction, the company offered to halt profit repatriation but keep the prices high. The minister rejected that. He said pricing, not profit transfer, was the issue at stake. What's alarming is not just DStv's posture, but the response from many Ghanaian consumers, some of whom defended DStv's right to charge what it wants, invoking the free market rhetoric. Even as they are squeezed dry by the very prices they are defending. On internet data, you will recall telcos like MTN and Telecel have charged fees that others have deemed exorbitant. For instance, look at the bundle. You pay 350 cedis for 90 gig or 200 gig, with what some have said are really poor service and disappearing balances. Users have frequently complained of data vanishing within hours, unfair throttling, and zero customer recourse. These aren't isolated anecdotes. They are the lived reality for millions of Ghanaian users. And when the public demanded answers, the authorities initially claimed their hands were tied. It was only after sustained public agitation that the telcos introduced slightly improved bundles. That is not market efficiency. It is corporate resistance caving to popular outrage. Across Africa, Ghana's telcos and pay TV platforms are among the most expensive. A side-by-side comparison shows that the same DStv bouquet is far cheaper in Nigeria and South Africa or Angola than it is in Ghana. Inflation and currency difference exist. That will not accept. But they do not justify paying more than double or even triple the price for the same content or data volume. In fact, Ghanaian consumers are being punished for a lack of alternative. Our telecom market isn't responding to competition. It is insulated from it, actually. Providers can charge whatever they want because there's no credible challenge. You either pay or you go dark. That is not free market. That is a cartel with branding. Whenever government attempts to protect consumers, like asking DStv in this instance to cut rates, critics have yelled, oh, this is a market interference. But that assumes our markets are truly competitive. There is no law forcing DStv or telcos to compete. No active price benchmarking. No enforceable consumer protection against unfair pricing. So what exactly are we leaving to the market? DStv justifies its last price hike by citing inflation and cedi depreciation. Fair enough. But now that the economy is improving, the cedi that is cited is stabilizing, the inflation they cite is dropping. So why are prices not being adjusted accordingly? Why the sudden silence and the reliance on market conditions? The answer is simple. They rely on consumer inertia and regulatory weakness. Then here lies the irony. Some subscribers have actually been defending these high prices, calling some George's ministerial actions as populist. And they argue that DStv or MTN or Vodafone might collapse or withdraw. But DStv is not going anywhere. Neither are the telcos. Ghana is a profitable market. But when citizens start defending the very systems that extort them, it reveals something deeper, that we have normalized abuse, that exploitation has been disguised as excellence. Ghanaians will say, I quote, I might stop paying or I'll pirate content instead. Or perhaps you go IPTV. That resignation is proof of consumer dependency. It signals a population accustomed to predation in digital pricing. In effect, we rely on DStv not as a choice, but as a cost of modern dignity. This is where our lawmakers must act. Ghana still lacks an active competition and fair trade law. A legislation has been talked about for years, but still sitting in limbo for years, and we haven't taken action. Without this, there is no strong authority to investigate dominant firms, assess abuse of market power, or demand price justification. Let's not be fooled into thinking that demanding fairness in pricing is somehow anti-business or anti-market. Even the most capitalist economies on earth, the United States, the countries in the European Union, do not leave their citizens to the mercy of unchecked corporate power. In 2021, just about 4 years ago, the US Congress hauled top tech CEOs before antitrust committees for monopolistic behavior. Just 2 years ago, the Biden administration forced pharmaceutical companies to negotiate drug prices for Medicare recipients for the first time in history because free markets without consumer protections quickly become profit jungles. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority frequently investigates and sanctions companies for price gouging and anti-competitive behavior. In France, energy companies were ordered to freeze tariffs because the Russia-Ukraine crisis and it shielded citizens from hardship. These are some of the most capitalistic countries you can think about. So why should Ghana do less? Why should we pretend that regulation is weakness when the most advanced economies use it as strength? Strong markets are not created by letting companies run riot. They are built by laws that prevent abuse, by regulators who intervene when necessary, and by governments that prioritize citizens over shareholders. Ghana is not an island. We do not operate in some parallel universe. If Western governments can restrain giants like Amazon, Meta, Pfizer, and Shell, then surely we can tell DStv and our telcos, enough is enough. The economy is recovering, the currency is stabilizing, so lower the prices or step aside. And until that law passes, this country will remain a playground for corporate greed. Ministers can issue ultimatums, but there is no legal muscle to back them up. Multinationals, they know this, and that is why their posture is this, and that is why their prices remain stubborn. When data costs a cedi per megabyte or 350 cedis for a mediocre internet connection, and DStv costs up to $83, that's more than 850 cedis, what does it mean for the average Ghanaian? It means students who have to use online classes cannot do so because data is high. Small businesses cannot upload videos, and families cannot afford news or entertainment. It means technology becomes a luxury, not a tool for development. High prices are not a reflection of economic conditions. They have become a reflection of unchecked power. They are the cost of a system that values multinational profits more than citizens' access. And in this episode of Fellow Ghanaians, what we are simply saying is that this is not just about reducing rates. It's about whether or not Ghana values fair markets or tolerates extortion. Fellow Ghanaians, when a government speaks for consumers, when regulators push back on corporate arrogance, and then activists call for legal reform, Ghana is not becoming anti-business. Ghana is in fact defending the dignity of its people. we must stop pretending that the market forces are a holy grail. In unregulated spaces, market forces are not just invisible, they are merciless. A market without rules is not free, it is feral. And perhaps the greatest insult of all is that despite these punishing prices, the quality of service remains embarrassingly poor. Some of these pay-per-view platforms frequently blacks out live channels during major events and offers outdated content repackaged as premium. With a setting in of the clouds, your channels go off. Telcos boast about 4G and 5G speeds, yet data disappears mysteriously. Networks drop calls without reason, and customer service is either inaccessible or dismissive. The average Ghanaian pays more per gigabyte than many of their peers on the continent, but receives a fraction of the reliability, the speed, and the courtesy. In many cases, customers spend more time troubleshooting, putting their phones on airplane mode and redialing than actually enjoying the service they've paid for. What kind of market charges premium rates for substandard products and then calls it fair? That is not a free market. That is a rigged one. So there are a couple of things we must do. First, we need to pass a competition and fair trade practice bill immediately. No more excuses. Then we need to introduce price benchmarking for essential digital services. DStv and telcos must show why Ghanaian consumers pay more than counterparts elsewhere. We must also establish a Digital Consumer Protection Commission with the power to monitor data fraud, pricing abuse, and enforce penalties. We must also encourage real competition, facilitate new entrants, and support satellite and internet providers. And then we must end the licensing bottlenecks. Then obviously, we must educate the Ghanaian public. Ghanaians must understand that the value they must get is not a gift, it is a right. We must stop cheering high prices under the illusion of free markets. Fellow Ghanaians, this is more than subscription and data bundles. This is about whether we want a country where the economy works for the many or for the few with licenses and pricing power. Let us not be a nation where DStv and telcos set the rules and everyone else just adjusts. If we do this, we will not be getting these ultimatums from them. Prices will adjust naturally and the services will improve. And then ultimately, consumers, you and I, will no longer be captives of corporate greed. Fellow Ghanaians, we demand fairness, we demand accountability, and I join you to demand a market that serves you and not one that feeds you. I'll see you again tomorrow, and hopefully we can get some action on this matter. Have a great day.